Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from. I'm just admitting our guests from the waiting room. All right, looks like we're all in. So at this point, I'm going to invite everyone in the room to maybe silence their phone or put it at least face down. And I invite you to engage with us for the next hour while we dive into this webinar. Before we continue, I want to do an acknowledgement of traditional lands. Royal Roads University acknowledges that the campus is located on the traditional lands of the Kosepsan and Lekwungen ancestors and families. It is with gratitude that we now learn and work here, where the past, the present, and the future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff come together. Welcome. So for this session, we are recording it. So if you have to pop out early or you're watching this recording later, we will be sharing a recording link with everyone. Because it's recorded, we do have your mics on mute right now, but just because you're on mute doesn't mean you can't engage and interact with us throughout today's session. I'd like to invite everyone right now to test out the chat box. If you want to open your chat and if you want to say hello and where in the world you're joining us from, we invite that. So just pop that into the chat, and we'll be using the chat today for engaging questions, comments, ideas. So feel welcome to get comfortable with that now. Oh, I see somebody is from Chile, Saskatchewan, Saskatoon, Fort McMurray, Alberta, Nanaimo, Cold Edmonton, Windsor. I can't even read that fast. We'll keep them coming. And today's session is post-pandemic higher education enrollment trends. And I have a really quick poll for everybody in the room here today. So I'm going to invite you to look up at the screen and I'm going to launch the poll. So we'll give that about 10 or 15 seconds to look at the poll. The question is, what's your level of concern about the enrollment trends you're seeing? And the options you can choose from are, I'm very concerned, I'm a bit concerned, I'm not concerned, or not applicable, or prefer not to answer. I'll leave that there for a few moments. Okay, I'm going to count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cast your vote. Okay, so you can look up at your screen, you can see the results, and we have about 37% of the people in the room today are very concerned, 61% are a bit concerned, and 2% are I'm not concerned. Awesome. Well, that's really great to see that, and I'm really looking forward to exploring that throughout today's session. And now I'm pleased to welcome up Dr. Robin Mueller.
Thank you very much. And welcome to everyone who is joining us today and who joins us later to watch the recording. Thank you for coming. It's been fascinating watching this poll, and it explains why there are so many of you here today. So we're here to talk about post-pandemic higher education enrollment trends. We have a couple of experts in the room who have joined us to help lead us through a conversation about enrollment trends in higher education. So I would like to just briefly say thank you to Stefanie Ivan and Clayton Smith, who are leading our conversation for today. I'm going to let them provide their own deeper introductions. And before we go any further, I should also say that I am the program head for the Masters of Higher Education Administration and Leadership at Royal Roads University, and the graduate certificate in Strategic Enrollment Management falls under my portfolio. So that's why I'm here today and helping out with this session. I'm going to be here to answer your questions as we go along. And also I will leave you with my contact information prior to the end of our session so that you can get in touch with me if you have any questions. So Mara, we can jump right in. Here we go. Okay, I'll turn it over to Clayton.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Mueller. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be here. I'm here today in my capacity as an instructor for Royal Roads in the newly developed program, but also my day job is with the University of Windsor, where I'm a professor in the Faculty of Education. A little bit more about me. I've been doing this thing called enrollment management. It seems like forever, and in both the US and in Canada. And I recognize many of you in the room, so welcome to our little discussion. What we're going to do next is we're going to just going to tell you a little bit about how we acquired the information that we'll share with you. And then I'll share a little bit of it. Steph will share a bit more of it. And then we'll have a conversation with all of you so that we can have a really authentic kind of pulse, if you will, by the end of our time together. So in front of you on the screen, you can see the methods that we used. The first thing we did was we reviewed publicly available data. What's out there that we can get on the web through Higher Education Strategy Associates, Globe and Mail, Statistics Canada, Canadian Undergraduate Survey Consortium, Council of Ministers of Education, just to name a few. We just went wherever our little fingers took us, and that's how we got that. We also reached out to our various networks, and you might have seen social media little announcements saying, gee, if you have a thought on this topic, send it along, and we collected those as well on all our various social media locations. And then the third one is had the pleasure of asking students in my class in the SEM certificate. They're taking strategic planning right now, strategic enrollment management planning right now, and several of them shared their thoughts as well. So what we'll share with you is a compendium of bringing together all of those thoughts. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a beginning thread, and this is sort of the bigger picture, if you will, and then Steph will talk to you about some of the student profiles. So what you see first here is that college enrollments are continuing to grow. It's mostly due to continuing growth of international students, though, and that decreases have been reported in the Maritimes. So we've been hearing about some of the challenges the Maritimes have been facing for some time, but I think one of the important pieces here that is going on across the country, certainly in my home province, is the growth of the international students in the college sector. It is massive, and it is real, but it is also risky. So I'll share that with you. The second item it says, also related to the colleges, is there's been a reduction in demand for trades program. And it's thought that this might be because of the stronger economy that's starting to rebound, unemployment is lower, these kinds of things. It doesn't always play out that way, and it doesn't play out that way everywhere in the country, but it is a factor that's worth considering. Now turning to universities, we see the enrollment is mostly stable, recording some slight increases and some slight decreases. The thought here is that some of that is related to what part-time students are doing. Again, and sometimes when the economy is going one way, we see part-time students. When the economy is going in the other way, we see less part-time students, but they seem to be the difference maker with regard to these slight increases and decreases. We're seeing some students start to shift away from the big research universities in the urban centers. I won't say that's a massive trend, but it's certainly noticeable. But they're not going far. They're going just outside. So in the Toronto area, we're seeing them coming out of the GTA, but not into another province. They are just moving just a bit out. We're starting to see some slight increases in interprovincial mobility, and that's particularly noticed in the Maritimes, where during the pandemic period, they saw increases in students coming from other parts of the country, which I'm sure it was a wonderful thing from their end of things. Also saw that emission conversion rate is sort of a little odd right now. It's not as predictable as it has been in recent years. And so we've seen some sizable numbers come in. In other words, the admission conversion rates have been high in some institutions, well higher than they had before. And that actually ended up creating housing problems and class limits and all sorts of other sorts of things. So maybe that will become more constant as we go forward. But for those of you who are benefiting from the plus side of that, congratulations. The completion rates have been impacted in some areas, and that is as the economy is up and down and all around, and as the pressures of just living today with the cost of living increases and other things, is that some students are leaving before their time, they're leaving before they can complete. which creates a thought that we might have is, how do we help with that? How do we help students stay or even come back as they go through that thought process? And the last one on my list here is growing interest in taking a gap year. We're seeing students that say, well, gee, maybe this is not the right time. The university and the colleges are still transitioning from online through hybrid, in many cases to face-to-face. And some are saying, well, gee, what I really want is this instead of that. And so can I take a year breather before I do that? And so students are thinking about that. Now let me turn it over to Steph, and she has some others to share with you.
Great, thank you. So just a brief introduction. I've had the pleasure of being a registrar, associate vice president in student services in Canada, and also traveling the country with Academica Group, visiting many of your campuses, looking at strategic enrollment management initiatives and plans. And my interest first grew in strategic enrollment management in the very early 1990s when I was first introduced to the enrollment funnel and to this STEM primer, which was written in 1993 by Michael Dolans. It was from a DataTel conference. So all 26 pages of intelligence on SEM from that time. And it piqued my interest in SEM and eventually led me to my own grad studies in the field. I've been happy to teach with Royal Roads in the Master of Arts in Higher Ed, Admin, and Leadership program since 2017. And my interest, of course, in enrollment management brings me here with Clayton and Robin today. So today I wanted just to talk to you and give you some brief highlights, really quick lens into some other enrollment trends. Let's start first with the fastest growing birth rate in Canada, Indigenous persons. And while rates of education have improved in general for our Indigenous learners, there's been relatively low rates of completion. And so, why is this important to us all? We know that better attainment rates give better job opportunities, higher rates of pay, and higher employment rates. So we're concerned that we're seeing improved rates of education, but not greatly improved rates of completion. International enrollment keeps leading the pack for enrollment growth throughout Canada. But the pandemic, as we know, slowed the growth temporarily with closed borders and travel restrictions. And that abrupt loss in international learners on the campuses impacted colleges and universities differently. It impacted colleges perhaps more heavily than universities, but the impact of provinces and territories was also different. Some experienced greater loss of students, some had greater loss of revenue. So it depended where you were with your international enrollments. Since 2018, 2019, though, growth has been increasing again. And in fact, in that year, there was a 13.6% increase of enrollments in international learners across Canada. And again, we see that growth increase. Part-time learners in Canada are in part due to helping the enrollment growth in universities. And when you take a look at unclassified learners, open studies learners, business and liberal arts learners, they're the ones leading the pack in those part-time studies in universities in particular. And maybe it's some of the flexibility with learning that has impacted those increased enrollments. These are the types of things we're going to want to hear from you about. In terms of overall student demographics in Canada post-pandemic, it would be no surprise to you at all to hear that 2/3 of the students are reporting a mental health issue. And our institutions are also seeing a rise in students with disabilities at just over about 30%, and visible minorities increased to about 44% as well. The pandemic has also challenged institutions to rethink how they support learning, and in particular, EDUCAUSE shared with us what I think most of us have heard. And I just want to stop here and thank so many of you for talking with me when I put out that post on social media. This is what you told me as well. It's, you know, the same as what Clayton and I found, that learners still want to be on campus with some hybrid presence and other options for learning. But they want their support for learning to take on some of what happened during the pandemic, when there was a greater shift for online and there were more supports online for learners. So for example, students want that hybrid experience, but they want it with online lecture notes, with videos, with all of those things that institutions and faculty learned primarily during the pandemic. But they just don't want that online experience exclusively. And they want a support that is virtual and seamless. And this extends beyond just the classroom through all of the services from front to back as they come onto campuses. And the last point that I want to make today, and I talked to several of you about this, is about the trust building and the reestablishing of relationship with your trusted partners that has to take place. One of you in particular described it very well. You said that you went from that on again, off again, we're open, closed, online, hybrid, we're not sure about today or tomorrow approach of the pandemic. And depending on where you are and where you draw your learners from, this had some significant impact on your relationships and hence to your enrollment. So these are just a few of the topics that we wanted to share with you today, and soon we'll ask you to weigh in too. So Robin, back to you.
Thank you very much. What we're going to do now is shift folks into breakout rooms. I'm going to ask you to please not disappear. Don't go away. We're not going to put you on the spot in breakout rooms. This is an opportunity for us to really quickly generate some ideas about what's happening with strategic enrollment trends in your sector. So we'd like to treat these breakout rooms as a very short opportunity to brainstorm as many thoughts and ideas as possible. And please feel free to participate according to your own comfort level in these breakout spaces. I'm going to ask that you select someone, one person in your breakout room, to keep track with notes in terms of what's being reported so that you can report back when we come back to our large group here. We're going to have about 10 minutes in these breakout rooms. So this is a really quick conversation with the goal of generating as many thoughts and ideas as possible. I'm going to look to Imera now to organize our breakout rooms, and Clayton and Steph will also pop in and out of your breakout rooms should you happen to have questions. Okay. Thanks everyone for participating in those breakout rooms. What I saw from my visits were very productive and rich conversations. So thank you for your contributions. I am going to turn things back to Clayton and Steph right now, just to facilitate your reporting back. And I will take notes as I'm listening to your reports back so that I can capture some of the themes and trends that we see coming up in our session today.
Thanks, Robin. If I can just jump in for a second, what we'd like to do at this part is hear from you. So each of you, I hope, has a recorder of sorts that can share the highlights from your discussion. And so we'll just go through them one at a time, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion after that. So maybe group one, if you could report first. Group one. Do you know which groups you are?
And I just wanted to mention, we do have the mics muted right now, but if you are group 1 and you're the reporter, if you just use the raise hand feature on Zoom, it'll show who you are, and then I can give you permission to unmute. So raise hand feature, which you'll find on your, near the reactions feature. Oh, Alice, wonderful. Thank you for raising your hand. I will give you, you should be able to unmute now.
Great, thanks. We didn't pick anybody, but I also always take notes, so I don't mind. It's interesting. International growth came up a lot, quite significant growth rates over the last couple of years. So that's outstanding, mostly in the post-grad world. What was interesting for me is hearing Loyalist College, for example, the trend for students or prospects looking for online studies. I'm not experiencing that here, so I'm always intrigued by that trend happening at other places. Talked about the emotional drain of the pandemic and the impact that is still having preparation of our learners and the need for learning supports. Heard that a couple of times. The financial needs of students is changing because of the cost of living increases, and then depending on institutions, there's different levels of impact. So there was cost of living, food insecurity, housing insecurity came up. And then we had a former employee from Cambrian who teaches at VIU, Jingai, I probably said it wrong, who teaches in hospitality now, and same experience I'm having at SAS Polytech, where the labor shortage is impacting course enrollments. So they're not back to pre-pandemic numbers because salaries have gone up and people can get jobs. Finds it's very cyclical, going up and down, and heavily dependent on the economy. And with that, I'll stop there. And if anybody else wants to chime in, please feel free to do so.
Okay, thanks, Alice. That's wonderful. Is there another group who would like to raise their hand and say what they talked about? Jen.
Thanks, Samara. All right, room 2, some really great comments. A couple things that came out, sort of overarching thoughts or comments were that, I mean, we all realize that the current student that we're taking care of and attracting and serving is definitely different from the past. And as we anticipate moving forward, the future student will be evolving and changing, and that there seems to be an interest in either current students or prospects and maybe more customizing their experience. There's a variety of different factors that many of us from different communities and institutions recognize, mental health, of course, being one, and housing was definitely another one that multiple people brought up. And the cost, of course, the cost of coming to school, determining whether or not the investment is worthwhile, the job prospects and vacancies, and where the education will take them in their career path. It's possible that prospects are really putting a lot more thought to that. Another comment, of course, was the gap year that some students are taking, just to kind of, instead of rushing in from high school into post-secondary, taking some time to really put some thought into what they want to do, how they want to spend their time and money. One comment I found really interesting too, which flows along with something that was said earlier, that even institutions that offered a lot of online courses and options, they're finding that there's an interest in requests for things like labs and less traditional online options that they would like to see online. And so it seems that there's this definite trend towards students having a very specific sense of the experience they'd like to have and which elements and pieces they'd like to have on campus versus online, and almost a bit of the best of both worlds, so that depending on what's going on in their life and their wellness and their health and their costs, they can maybe match those pieces and put together their educational experience that matches their interests, their life, their preferences. And student loans was another one that came up, that some students are having a tricky time finding those loans, and which of course is an important piece, the financial aspect of being able to attend school. And of course, anyone else in my group would like to add to that, please feel free.
Okay, how about group three? Group three, if you could have someone raise their hand. Or group four. There we have Luke, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm not actually sure if we were 3 or 4, but we had similar ideas that came up. But one of the things that I don't think we really discussed so far were things like IRCC delays. This has really impacted, especially international student enrollment, and the fact that in those countries where we may have partners such as agents who recruit on behalf of our institutions, if it's extremely difficult to or time consuming to create those applications and to help those students come to Canada, quite often they will, our agent partners will refer students to other areas of the world, such as Australia, where it's much easier to be able to apply and to become enrolled faster and with less headache. So that's one thing that we're seeing. As well, I think there was also another point brought up about new platforms really becoming more prevalent, especially for quick learning, so such as LinkedIn Learning, which is a fantastic platform, of course, but this can affect us in ways that possibly students were looking towards continuing education or studies to level up their skill set, but now it's becoming much easier to kind of do so from the comfort of their own home, and maybe they already have a license for LinkedIn Learning or something. So that's affecting kind of continuing education enrollments.
Okay, we have one more group out there. If someone would jump in and tell us what you think, we'd have all 4 groups. Please. Or alternatively, if someone else whose group has responded, here we have someone, Adam and Tom.
Hi, folks. Hi, Clayton. Good to talk to you again. It's Tom Brophy here. We didn't take detailed notes or probably any notes at all, but certainly a couple of the things we were talking about that we were seeing, some of the groups were talking about increases in international enrollment. Here at St. Mary's, we're seeing decreases or certainly flatlining of international enrollment, which is certainly concerning for us. Another conversation that we talked about was we're seeing a trend of students actually taking less courses. So our reduced course load, also seeing it, which of course from a bottom line perspective means a reduction of revenue from student tuition, which is something that's certainly very important to most, if not all, universities, but equally as much, related to what we know about retention theory is that the longer it takes students to graduate, the less likely they are to graduate. So there's some interesting trends certainly in that regard. Adam, I don't know if there's anything else hit you?
No, I think that was it for us. Yeah. Sorry that we didn't take great notes.
That's the maritime way, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, anyone else who wants to just jump in and share what their thoughts are before we move to the next part of our discussion? Just raise your hand if you'd like to, and Mara will press a lovely little button. Okay, so let me turn to my colleague Steph and ask her to see if she can pull together some of these threads for us.
Sure. Well, interesting as I popped into a couple of the discussion forums, one of the things I was hearing was, and as I talked to people in preparation for this session, many of the attendees are here today. One of the thoughts that keeps top of mind for me is on the preparation of learners. And I heard many things from many different people in the discussions today and in preparing for the session. Some people have mentioned that the preparation of learners in terms of academics has impacted admissions, and there have been concerns from faculty in the classrooms about the preparation of learners. Some of you have commented on the increasing number of supports necessary for learners as they've entered due to mental health supports that are necessary, services for students with disabilities, or general resource finding that somehow it seems as if learners have been coming less equipped. Thanks, Shelley. I see your note asking if there are increases in student conduct. If anybody wants to weigh in on that in the chat or come up on mic, feel free to do so. We want to have a conversation with you about these things. So it's interesting to me that one of the trends that people see that is impacting both the classroom and outside of the classroom is this idea that somehow that learners coming in post-pandemic are lesser prepared. Clayton, do you have any other thoughts that you'd like to add from what you've heard on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of things that just are front and center in my thinking for sure. And I was sharing this with one of the groups that I was in, and that is that mental health has not impacted our students evenly. And I hear from my colleagues who work more directly with international students that statistically about twice the clip for international students. I hear numbers like 40% and that kind of number versus a sort of a 20% number for sort of the domestic group. And I think what we need to be always cognizant of is that not everybody manages things in the same way. Not everybody has the same emotional health, has the same, in some cases, academic preparation, as Steph has indicated. But I think it's the issue of we live in uncertain times, and probably none of us has really figured out how to cope with that perfectly yet. And I think being aware of those differences is hugely important. The international student question, of course, is prevalent pretty much on all the campuses, and the impact of the study permit slowdown is impacting us greatly. And I know in my own world, I saw our about half the number of students we expected last fall come through that would have come through in a normal year, and that certainly had some impact as well. But the other thing is that, and Steph has alluded to this, is partnering with your colleagues across the campus, which is sort of the secret sauce of SEM. And these days I sit in a classroom and I teach both at Royal Roads and at the University of Windsor, and I see how important it is that we work collectively and supportively with our faculty colleagues, because their training doesn't touch in some of these areas, and they are looking for support from us and others on how best to cope with all of that. So these are some of the things that are coming out for me. But again, the other thing is that the economy piece and what it's doing to our student perceptions of what they can do or can't do in this time is very real. And I think we just need to be conscious of it in terms of understanding what they're going through, perhaps spending a little time on financial literacy, talking to them about how is it that we can maybe even front end some of our support, but also back end some of our support for the students who might be nearing completion and are just running out of cash. Those kinds of things. So those would be some of my thoughts. Anybody else have anything to jump in? Karan, did I say your name right?
Good to see you. Just jump in.
Yes, thanks, Steph, and thanks, Clayton. Just back to that point of academic dishonesty, yes, we have seen an increase as well at our institution, especially post-pandemic. Our institution was the first one in Ontario that went in person just in a few months as things were getting cleared in Ontario. And I think that the immediate shift in in-person learning from online learning is one of the reasons for that, where students were in a way used to do assignments in an open book format with less invigilation, and now they are actually in classrooms with faculty, walking around them while they're doing assignments and exams. That is one of the reasons. And the other thing, which could be a pretty new sort of, a factor in this area, could be the increasing use of AI technology. Example, chatbot, right? You can just type in a question and it gives you an answer, or you can just give it a topic and it types an essay for you, right? Or you really want to sort of like, type in very well-versed email to someone higher in the institution or your faculty, and you give it some hints and it types a full email for you, right? It's kind of concerning that where the education industry will be in sort of like a few years from now, with the increasing use of AI. And I just Googled it a few minutes ago just to check if it's still up there, and there's a free version available on Google. I can download it right now and I can do my full assignment with the help of AI, and it'll type answers for me. So that's quite concerning, and I think that's gonna create challenges for us as administrators and leaders in higher education to be able to sort of overcome that challenge and still maintain the quality of our education.
Absolutely. And, I'm glad that you're bringing these up. We do plan to meet again in March. I don't know if you've seen the session advertisement. I'm sure Amara will talk about it at the end of the session. But, as we get together again today, we were talking about enrollment trends. As we get together in March, we want to talk about the strategies that we'll look at to mitigate some of the trends and to move forward as institutions. Already as you're talking, I'm thinking about things that we're doing on campuses. And I look forward to having that conversation with all of you again, how we can work across the institution with those trusted partners in an organic SEM type of approach. And yeah, just having those conversations. I know we are moving out of time though. Amara, how much time do we have left? I see Grant has his hand up.
I would say we have about 5 more minutes left.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it over to you then, Grant. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll be very quick. One strategy that I recommend, especially when working with international students, is to spend some time with actual international students. We can be quite good with stats and data and getting the numbers in our enrollment reports and all of that, but there's something very different about meeting with these students. So I'll just share a very quick story. I was teaching a class, 100% of them were international students. And I met with them after the class because they had some concerns about their enrollment. They knew I was the registrar and they had some concerns about the enrollment, their friends being able to stay at the university. And they said, somebody just needs to tell our friends that they're going to be okay, that they can do this. They don't feel at home. They don't feel like that this is a place that's going to necessarily look after them. And all you need to do is tell them they're going to be okay. And I thought that was so simple and such a profound comment, So I think it's really helpful to actually meet with the students and get to know them and get their feedback in our responses.
Thanks, Grant. I appreciate you taking us back home to recognize the importance of those interpersonal communications and relationships with our learners, from that point when the institution first makes contact with them all the way throughout, we can't forget those points. So very critical. Thank you.
And thank you for returning us to the idea of hearing the student voice and how important that is. So now that we've come full circle, thanks, Grant. I'm going to turn things back over to Amara to say a little bit about our graduate certificate in strategic enrollment management.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody today for contributing and the dialogue. It was very, very rich. And thank you, Robin. Thank you, Clayton and staff for facilitating all of this. So I just wanted to briefly mention, we do have a program it's first of its kind in Canada. It is a grad cert in strategic enrollment management. We do have an intake coming up, which is really exciting. On August 14th is the start date, 2023, and we have an application deadline of May 14th, 2023. And this program is designed for people like yourself, working professionals who are working in higher education, who want to continue working and also learning and getting some more education in strategic enrollment management. And once you complete this program, you'll understand SEM theory even more. It sounds like the people in the room here today have a very good grasp on SEM theory already, but you'll dive in into the effective application of it. You'll effectively create, implement, and assess institutional recruitment and retention plans, and you'll learn how to analyze enrollment data, financial reports, and the alignment of academic and co-curricular programs. You can apply online. It's really simple. I have a feeling that Lisa's already popped the link into the chat to the program page, so you can have a look and see the different requirements for applying, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. And if you have any questions whatsoever about the admission requirements, which Lisa just popped in the chat, or the application requirements, or program outcomes or courses, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to answer those questions. Or if you want to continue the conversation about anything that we've discussed today, here at Royal Roads University, we're an intentionally smaller institution, and we're here to talk about these things. We have some upcoming webinars. I popped a link in the chat about that. So continue engaging and connecting with us. And I want to thank you all for your time today. And I wanted to ask Robin, staff, or Clayton, if you had any final closing words that you would like to share with the people in the room today.
I can offer one thing that kind of jumped out from something that I heard Grant say, and also that was present in some of our earlier discussions. And that is how it's so important as a SEM person to be a scholar of your own students, to understand them, to connect with them, to have lunch with them, to go into the class with them, that it's so important, particularly in these uncertain times when they are so anxious and so concerned about this thing we call higher education and how it's changing. So I would sort of close with that thought. And for those of you who have an interest in the program, certainly I can echo what Mara and Robin and Steph are saying. I teach a couple of the classes. If I can answer any questions, I'll stay online, or you can reach me offline. Thank you.
And I would just like to say one thing, thank you for taking the time to gather here and to share your thoughts with us today. I would just encourage you to go back to your campuses and to share what you heard with your colleagues. I think it is very important that we continue the conversation and share what we know with others on our campuses, to make sure that we are supporting the learners the best that we can. And the way that we can do that is through sharing of that information and continuing those dialogues on our campuses. So thank you.
Thank you, Steph. And I'd just like to close off today by picking up on that a little bit and saying how important this kind of conversation and discussion is, because there seems to be some sense of mystery around enrollment management and strategic enrollment management trends, and also a sense of isolation when in fact we are a part of a larger system, and we can be creating these good relationships with one another to have these conversations and do some collaborative learning in this area. So I really do hope you'll join us for our next session in March. I have left my contact information in the chat. If you have any questions about the graduate certificate in SEM or the McHeal program, I am happy to connect with you at any time. And thanks to Amira for leading us through this session today.
Thank you all. Hope you have a great rest of your day today, and I'll be sharing a recording out shortly by email. Take care.